So let me share with you a thought. I was thinking about this the other day. This Shabbos is Parshas Yaakov Pekudei. It's also Parshas Chodesh, right? So we read about Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan. I think Sunday's Rosh Chodesh, right? I think so. So Rosh Chodesh Nisan. There's something that Chazal in the Haggadah we say Yachal Rosh Chodesh, right? That there's a thought that maybe the mitzvah of talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim could begin already from Rosh Chodesh. So the Haggadah says, no, it's not true because you need matzah and mar. It's actually only on Pesach. But the Havamina, the thought that the mitzvah of talking about Mitzrayim, Yetzias Mitzrayim begins on Rosh Chodesh, then needs explanation. So evidently, from the Haggadah you already see that from Rosh Chodesh, it's already Yetzias Mitzrayim, from Rosh Chodesh. So the question is, in what way? What are we doing from Rosh Chodesh and on that's connecting us to Yetzias Mitzrayim? Like in a certain sense, in other words, what the Haggadah seems to be telling us is that the Avodah of Pesach already begins from Rosh Chodesh. So there is something that we do from Rosh Chodesh, or that you can do from Rosh Chodesh, and it's one of these things. It's very often like swept under the rug, not in a bad way, but it's just one of the things we don't pay attention to. If you do it, you do it. You don't do it, you don't even think about it. And that's Birchas Ilanis. No, not cleaning. No, you leave it to the wives. Don't worry about it. No, you're ready for Shleishim Yom. You should be cleaning. It's ready. You don't say Tachanun either, right? Because so what do we do from Rosh Chodesh on? But preferably even Rosh Chodesh to do is Birchas Ilanis. Right? And we see a fruit tree. This time of the year of Nisan begins to blossom. So the mitzvah, the Gemara says, when you see a fruit tree and it has beginnings of its blossoms, you make a bracha. You thank Hashem for beautiful trees, Lahanas ben Bnei Adam, Birchas Ilanis. That's the first avodah that we have from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So it must be that Birchas Ilanis somehow, if it's beginning on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it must be that somehow that's connected to Yetzias Mitzrayim. So let's speak for a few minutes. What's this inyan of Birchas Ilanis? What should we be thinking about when you find a fruit tree and make a bracha? Okay, there's the simple thing. Okay, thank you Hashem for making trees. Okay, so the Rizal says in Shar Gegulim like this. It's a Mordei Gezach. The Rizal said that we know that there's such an idea of Gilgulim, right? Such an idea that Neshama after 120 maybe did not complete its mission 100%, had some imperfections about it, so it comes back. So when we think of Gilgulim, reincarnation, we usually think of it as a person coming back as a person, right? Ruvain went through his life, maybe didn't complete his avodah 100%, so he comes back as Shimon. Okay, and then it becomes Tchias Mason, so it's a Ruvain, is it Shimon? Okay, whatever, all those questions.
Which family does he go to?
Yeah, all these in Yanim. The answer is both, but okay, don't worry about it. The Rizal said like this, but there is a phenomenon of a neshama coming back, not as a person. There is a phenomenon of a neshama that, whatever reason, its imperfections or its things that it still has to work on, it demands that it be mizgalgal, that it becomes reincarnated as daimim, as inanimate objects. There's such a thing as a neshama that's stuck in a rock. There's such metzias. In Shar Gegulim, Rechaim Vital records ma'asim, mamish, stories and stories about the Arizal who would be walking down the street, and he would see these neshamas, and neshamas would appear to him and talk to him from rocks and from all these from buildings and dirt and all the from gravestones, And the Arizal would talk about, okay, that neshama, this is his name, this is when he lived, this is his background, this is his story. We have to say Tilim because of certain inyanim. And the Arizal didn't know this person, but the Talmidim would do the background checking. It's true, it's 100% true that this person, that was his name, and that's the story of the person. There's such an inyan of a neshama being reincarnated in an object, huh?
How do you do a tikkun and a don't? I mean, it's passive. A passive tikkun?
So what? Okay, so there's
built into a shul. So
that would be a tikkun. That would be a tikkun.
They did. That's done.
So there, in the stories of the Rizal, it was that he knew certain tehillims to say.
Yeah. Why would what? On the cover?
The simple reason for that is just as a way of it's a cover that people should know that this is a grave that's being visited. So you put a rock because it'll stay there. That's the simple reason for it. There you go. No. So daimim is one option. It could come back as tzemeach, it could come back as chai, or come back as medaber. Now, Aleph, Beis, the Rizal said that when you have a neshama that is reincarnated as inanimate object, or tzemeach or chai, it has to sort of move its way up the ladder. So from daimim, when it, when the Rebbeinu Shalom sees that it's ready to upgrade, so then it moves into tzemeach, and then from tzemeach it moves into chai, from chai. How does it go from daimim to tzemech? So there's different ways for it to happen. It could happen metaphysically. It doesn't have to be anything physical. From tzemech to chai, it could happen by the animal eating it. Different things. Gimel. The Rizal said that there are certain times in the year when this upgrade can take place. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is when neshamas that are reincarnated in tzemeach, in plant life, they upgrade to chai. It's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So Mekubalim say that when you make birchas ilanis, the concept of birchas ilanis, the bracha, when you make on a fruit tree, what's happening when you make that bracha is that you're giving strength to all neshamas that are stuck in trees or stuck in all plant life, the strength to upgrade going from tzemech to chai. That's what birchas ilanis is.
Only fruit trees.
So you're making on a fruit tree, but the energy that you are exuding in that bracha gives strength to all tzemech, and the shamas that are stuck in tzemech can now go into chai. Okay, fine. So what does this mean in avoda? Because we're not going to be misak in the shamas. Like, well, what exactly does this mean? So this idea of the shamas being stuck in daimim, tzemech, or chai. So again, the way the Rizal describes it is like mamash. A person dies and they come back reincarnated in these things. But we have to, in terms of avoda, there is such a phenomenon as a yid that's stuck in tzemech. That's going to be the point of right now, what Pesach is about. There's such an idea of a yid that's stuck. Forget an old neshama. Right now, a person's alive, but they're stuck in a mindset that's called tzemech. And the union of Yetzias Mitzrayim is for that yid to be redeemed and to be taken out of his galus, and to upgrade his mindset from seeing himself as tzemech to seeing himself as a davar chai.
Come off the tree as a fruit, you go into it.
And then it's eaten, right? So that's Chiyas Mason, right? In this sense, exactly. So here. So what does that mean? What is the difference between tzemech and chai? What's the difference? Well, obviously, so chai means to be alive. In what way? Movement. A tzemech grows, right? Plants grow, trees grow, but they're mechuber lakarka. They're stuck to the ground, and they could only move within that place that they're planted in. They can't move from one place to the next. That's where they are. Wherever you plant a tree, it'll get taller, slowly but surely, but it is exactly where it's going to remain where you plant it, unless you go and uproot it. But that's where it's going to be. A chai, by its very definition, an animal is what? Is able to move from place to place. And it's not stuck in the spot that it started at. What does this mean in Avodas Hashem? So there is a phenomenon where a yid is stuck in gullus, in a gullus of being a tzemeach. And the yid feels and sees themselves as mechuber l'karka, as stuck in the ground. See, what was Mitzrayim about? What was the gullus of Mitzrayim? The gullus of Mitzrayim, Chazal say that no slave ever escaped Egypt. Like, how? Why? Like, never happened. Like, the barbed wire was so high? Like, what exactly was it? Well, the answer is because the klipa, the tumah of Mitzrayim, was a tumah that penetrated the mind of the slave and said, you are mechuber l'karka. Like, this is who you are. Yeah, you could grow, you could get a little bit taller, it's true. You could move a little bit up. But at the end of the day, you are anchored in where you're anchored. This is who you are, this is who your father was, this is who your grandfather was, this is who your kids are going to be. Zeh. Tzemech. That's who you are. The Geula, that's why no one ever escaped Mitzrayim. It wasn't because the watchtowers were so high. It was just no one ever had a havamina of leaving. This is who I am. I'm a tree. It's impossible to leave. It's interesting when Moshe Rabbeinu is sent by Hashem to take us out, right? So he goes to Parai, and it's interesting. In all of Chumash, the only place where the Jewish people are called by this term is by the process of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're called Ivrim. Elokei ha'Ivrim, the God of the Ivrim. How do you translate Ivrim? Hebrews, right? But what is the word Ivrim? Why are we called Ivrim? Avram ha'Ivri, right? Why is Avram called Avram ha'Ivri? Because Avram came me'Evrar Nar. He came from the other side of the Euphrates, right? He traveled over the Euphrates to get to Eretz Yisrael. That's why he's called Ivrim. That's why I have the Haggadah begins also. Me'Evrar Nar Yashua Sin Me'olam Terach Avi Avram. That the story of the Exodus begins with a statement that we come from the other side of the Euphrates. Like, why are the Jewish people being described in that way of Ivrim, Dafka in this story of Yetzias Mitzrayim? The answer is because you know what an Ivrim means? An Ivrim means he moved from one place to the next. He was not mechubar l'karka. He wasn't stuck to where he was. He was able to move. Rabbi Nachman has a Torah in the Zakutinsky where he talks about how you have a yid who feels very magushim, very, very physical, very low, very stuck. And the person, Rabbi Nachman talks about this, that the person might therefore not feel so motivated to grow because he'll say to himself, how much could I grow already? So let's say, what's already the madrigas that I could reach? I could not say as much lashon hara. You know what I mean? I could try to control my temper a little bit. So, what's that worth? Rabbi Nachman said a Jew has to remember that you are not samech, you are a chai, which means that even though it might feel that you are stuck mechubar l'karka, and it might feel that all you're doing is just a little bit of a movement upward, you should know, Rabbi Nachman writes these words, that in Shemayim, a yid down here who moves even a little bit, and the person feels from your perspective, from the person's perspective, that they're just like a plant that's just growing a little bit, but they're not really moving. In Shemayim, a yid is always moving. And a little movement down here in Shemayim is the person's traveling, the Rabbi Nachman says, Revav is tens of thousands of miles. Tens of thousands of miles. One little move down here. Because this is the reality that we live in. We live in a world that we're still in Mitzrayim, you know what I'm saying? We're in a world that is trying to convince us that we're tzemeach, which means that any movement that we make is not really moving. It's growing a little bit up, nothing's really happening. The geul of Mitzrayim is that we're ivrim. We're ivrim. This is, by the way, why on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Rebbeinu Shalom commanded us about taking the Korban Pesach, right? And part of the whole process of Yetzias Mitzrayim, like the Korban Pesach is central. Like we don't have that anymore, unfortunately, right? And to us, the Seder is like the central theme is like matzah and maror or whatever. But by the times of Beis Hamikdash, the centerpiece of Pesach was the Korban Pesach, which was dafka an animal. With the mayich chayi, with the blood of the Korban Pesach, we got out of Mitzrayim. Blood is something that's by chai, not samech, right? Plants don't have blood. Animals have blood. Why is the Korban Pesach so central? Is because we're taking an animal and we're using that, we're making an animal the symbol of our redemption. This is why it's interesting. The Gemara says that the pasuk says that it would take the what happened? In order to prepare for the Korban Pesach, they had to make sure it was unblemished, right? So what would they do? Everyone knows they took the sheep, they tied it to their bed, right? Of all places, like why? A bed is what? A bed is where a person sleeps, right? When you're asleep, you're basically just samech. You're sitting there, you're not moving, you're growing, right? That's where, little children grow when they're asleep, but you're not moving. That's what's going on over here. The side of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the transition from tzemech. What looks like a person that's just a tzemech, you're really a chai. And so dafka, the sheep of the Korban Pesach, is tied to the bed. The bed is also the place where neshamas come to the world. And so that's dafka, the aliyah from being a tzemeach to a chai is happening at that moment of Yetzias Mitzrayim. This is why it's interesting, when they roasted the Korban Pesach, so it says in the Gemara that they would roast it, the Korban Pesach had to be roasted with fire, couldn't be cooked, right? So the Gemara says there's a little bit of an issue that if, let's say, you use a metal rod to, as a spit that the Korban Pesach is going to be on, so the problem is that the ends of the rod will be heated by fire, the inside of the rod, because of that, will be heated, and then the inside of the sheep will be cooked from metal, not from fire. So the Gemara says, therefore, you have to use a piece of wood, because the inside of the wood, the middle part of the wood, is not going to be heated up because the ends are hot, right? It doesn't conduct heat like that. But there's a different problem. The problem is that wood has moisture. And so what's going to happen is invariably the moisture of the wood is going to be spucked out, and then the sheep is going to be cooked with the water and not just the fire. So says the Gemara, they did was they would use atse rimain, they would use pomegranate wood. Because pomegranate wood is completely dry. On the outside, on the inside, mamish yavesh. That's what the Gemara says. This is an amazing thing. The Jewish people are compared to a rimon, to a pomegranate, right? It's interesting. If the wood of a pomegranate tree is considered yavesh, that means it's almost as if it's dead. So when you have the rimon growing off the tree, it looks like it's tzameach. It looks like it's connected to the ground, and it's growing via the tree. But the truth is, the wood of the pomegranate tree, it's dry through and through, which means it's almost like it's dead. So how is the rimon growing? It's chai. The rimon is almost like it's like a it's a fruit, but in a certain sense, it has the quality of being alive, of being a davar chai. It's not, in a certain sense, it's not mechuber l'karka, it's not stuck to the ground, because the tree that it's attached to is not really a live tree. So in a certain sense, it's just growing on its own like a davar chai.
We should try to make a broccoli lettuce on a pomegranate tree.
Specifically, it'd be right if you could find one. I don't know, in Brooklyn it might be a little bit hard to find a pomegranate tree. But this is also why the Jewish people are compared to a rima, right? It says in Chazal that afilu poishe Yisrael, even the sinners of the Jewish people are moli mitzvahs karima, are full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate is full of seeds. Why a rima? The answer is because the poishe Yisrael, the sinner of the Jew, feels like he's a davar mechuber l'karka. He's stuck in a certain thing, and even when he does a mitzvah, he feels like, oh, what am I accomplishing already? It's a little movement, it's nothing. No. You're like a rima. To you, it feels that you're stuck to the ground, and you're growing from that place, and you're not really alive. The answer, you're a rima. It looks like that, but the truth is, you're mamash davar chai. This is why it's interesting. The highest malach that exists is what's called, the name of the malach is malach matatrain. That's the name of the malach. See, malachim are like tzemeach, Chazal say that a malach it stands. It can't really move. Like if the malach is created, its inyan is like chesed, that's all it's going to be. If this malach is like din, that's all it's going to be. It can't really move from place to place. It could grow a little bit, but it's ultimately stuck in how it was created. The greatest malach of all is malach matat. It's interesting that the malach matat, if you think about the word, it's the word rimon, mem in the beginning, and reish vav nun at the end. That's rimon, but tes in the middle. Tes means chai, alive, and that's what a rimon is. A rimon is, it looks on the outside like a malach, like a davar tzemeach, but on the inside, if you think deeply about it, it's mamash davar chai. So it's dafka the Korban Pesach, which is the representation of the Jewish people transitioning and moving from tzemeach to chai, which is what happens by Birchas Ilanis from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, right? So dafka, therefore, the piece of wood that they use to roast the Korban Pesach is a remind, because it's saying that even if you think of yourself as like, okay, maybe that's good for Yidden that are like Bali Tshuva and like Mom is changing their lives around. What about a guy like me? I'm not changing my life around. All I'm doing is like, I'm saying one less word of Lashon Hara a day. Like that's my big deal. So I'm still mechuber l'karka, and I don't find within myself the strength to sort of make an overhaul of my life. So comes the Atzei Rima in the pomegranate tree to say, no, even you, it looks like to you, to the naked eye, to the more superficial viewpoint, that you're a fruit that's coming from a tree and you're stuck to the ground. But the truth is, inside, it's chai. Inside is mamash alive. And it looks to you that all you're doing is one less minute of Lashon Hara a day, but you know what that means in Shemaim? In Shemaim, that means that you're traveling hundreds of thousands of miles in Shemaim. There's no such thing that every Jew is an Ivri in that way. This is what the Avodah of Birchas Ilanis is. This is why, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we were also given the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. What's Kiddush HaChodesh? Kiddush HaChodesh is that there's a new moon, right? What does it mean a new moon? It means that it's when the moon is full. So in the city you can't really tell, but if you go to the country, when it's a full moon, it's pretty light. You could really see your way around in the dark, right? But then, as 2 weeks later, the moon is completely gone. It's mamish pitch black. And then what happens the next day? Oh, the new moon appears. But how much of a new moon? A sliver of nothing. How much light does it really bring? How much darkness does it push away? Not much. But comes Bezdin when they see that first sliver and they say, Mekudesh, Mekudesh, that's the holiest thing in the world. Because with Kiddush HaChodesh, therefore Kiddush HaChodesh is like it's sort of establishing what Yetzias Mitzrayim is about. Yetzias Mitzrayim means that there's no such thing as a Yid that's a Tzemeach. Every single Yid is a Chai. It means even if what it looks to you is that all I'm doing is a little bit, I'm just adding a little bit growth in my life, a little bit, but I'm still stuck in the same place as before. I'm like that sliver of moon. How much light am I really emanating? I'm still stuck in Choshech. Yeah, a little bit. No. mamish mekudesh. That's the site of what's going on by Kiddush HaChodesh. That's what Birchas Ilanis is. So when it comes to Rosh Chodesh, you go and you look for a fruit tree, or maybe if you can find a pomegranate tree, What you're davening for, what you're thanking Hashem for, is not, yes, on a simple level, it's just for fruit trees, and that's amazing. But what's deeper than that is that by that bracha, you're giving yourself and all Yidden the strength to transition in their own mind from seeing themselves as a tzimeach to see themselves as a davar chai. And to realize that even if I'm just increasing my Yiddishkeit by mamish a hair's breadth, that hair's breadth, to me, it might seem that I'm still stuck in the same old stuff. I'm just maybe a little bit taller by a hair's breadth. But from the Rebbeinu Shalom's perspective, in Pnimius, you're a davar chai, which means that you've completely moved from your old spot to somewhere else. By increasing your Yiddishkeit a hair's breadth, it means that you're completely altogether a new person. That's Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's what Yitzias Mitzrayim is about, is literally moving from Mitzrayim to a new location. That's what Yitzias Mitzrayim is. But what's amazing is that the Seder night that we celebrate Yitzias Mitzrayim, we were still in Egypt. When did we leave Mitzrayim? The next morning. But Pesach night, is what's the Iker celebration, we were still in Egypt. The answer is, you're not there anymore. You're not there anymore. Because you've mentally now changed your life a little bit. You saw a sliver of the new moon. You're no longer in Egypt. You're no longer in Egypt. It looks like it. It feels like it, that I'm still stuck to the ground like a pomegranate. That's only an illusion. The truth is, the pnimius of a remind is a davar chai. That's the side of what's going on by, that's why there's a Maisa. Rabbi Nachman said over this story, it's a mashal that he said. He said there was once a Jew who was, from, God-fearing Jew, everything's fine, but he had a big problem in life, which was that he was always depressed. He was just sad. He was just always sad. And anything he tried to do to sort of get over his sadness, he never really stuck. So he'd be misamech himself with this and with that, it never really stuck until he realized one thing. This nakuda. He realized this truth, that any small thing that I do in this world, where there's so much inertia pulling me away from God, and I move closer to Hashem by a hair's breadth, you know what that means really? It means that I'm mamish, that in truth, I'm mamish moving from one place, one side of the universe to the other. It's like if a person's on a treadmill, right? So it doesn't feel like you're getting anywhere, but the truth is that's only because the treadmill's pulling you back, right? If the treadmill wouldn't be pulling you back, the amount of energy that you're spending to stay in one place would be taking you 5 miles, right? So, and this Jew realized that, and then realized how much simcha they should feel, and how much pride they should feel in every small thing that they do. Because every small thing that I do, it feels small to me, but only because I'm standing on a world which is really a treadmill pulling me the opposite direction.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So and even when a Jew falls back, right? Even when you fall back, it's not the pshat that really you're being pulled back by the treadmill. It's just at that moment the treadmill's faster than you are right now. And if you weren't pushing the opposite way, you'd be thrown that much further back. So even when a person is making a mistake and having a yerida, there's something to be joyful about in the fact that at least if I fell down a notch, the fact that I didn't fall down 50 notches is all because of my strength that I'm pushing the other way. So a person should be besimcha over everything. An accomplishment, even a small accomplishment, and even when a person fails, at least it wasn't a huge failure, because the truth is, life is pulling us down. So why are we not falling down to the lowest places? Well, the answer is because we're fighting against that constantly, and that's something to be proud of. We are called Ivrim. That's the title Ivrim that we have in Yitzias Mitzrayim, that we're called Ivrim. That's an amazing thing, that we're constantly moving, that we're not stuck anywhere, and even if it feels like we are, we're not. That's a huge simcha. That's the simcha of Pesach. No, Hashem should help that we should be zochet to be misamech ourselves like that, and to realize that Avram is called Avram Ivri, we are called Ivrim, and that should be a title of pride that we carry with us. That to transition from Tzemech into Chai, from Rosh Chodesh Nisan and onward, and we should be zochet to go like that. Michael el Chayil, Mamash Michael el Chayil.
Basically say